I think that Turkey's problems are really endemic to Turkey, meaning economically the country was already showing signs of slowing down. It's one reason why Turkish President Erdogan moved elections from November next year to June this year, which he just won. But of course, political problems with the US and the general foreign policy environment are exacerbating Turkey's economic problems. So I think we're seeing two aspects to it. Turkey's own economic problems, which are compounded by the crisis with the United States.
But Turkey's really big. Right?
It is.
Greece's problems were endemic to Greece, but everybody got concerned about the fallout from Greece. I don't know how many times bigger Turkey is than Greece, but I think it's a couple full points there.
But we think that the banks, we think there's only three major banks that are really
holding
on the hook.
Debt.
And that's a very different situation.
So the issue here is that
Greece.
Fewer banks hold less debt.
I believe that is part of the case. Sonar?
Yeah, I've seen two different schools of thought on the contagion issue. One is that Turkey might affect markets, especially Europe. And the one that a lot of my friends here in Washington and U.S. government are talking about is that maybe that's not going to be the case. Maybe Turkey's not, European markets are not as exposed, banks are not as exposed to Turkish economic downturn as people think it is.
I will say that a big difference here, and Michelle, you're going to shake your head on this, in agreement, I believe. Greece never had the ability to change its currency.
Right.
There's a huge safety valve on this issue here, which is that the Greek currency, as you said, or the Turkish currency, can float. Turkey was locked into the euro, and its domestic prices could not float as a result.
Yeah, and I would also add that if you go back to the early days of the Greek crisis, when banks could have sold their Greek debt at much higher prices, there was a lot of political intervention from the top. Don't do it, don't do it. They will not default. We're not going to let them. They could have just let Greece default early on, and we all would have been a lot better off. So, why doesn't he just release the pastor?
Well, this has at this stage become a crisis of misunderstandings and miscommunication. President Erdogan believed that he could continue to negotiate with the United States because he has some asks. There's a cleric, Turkish cleric who lives in the U.S. His name is Gülen. Not only Erdogan, but many Turks believe that he was behind the coup effort. Erdogan wants him to be extradited. There are other issues at stake here. But the problem was that he did not really understand that this issue of Pastor Brunson being under arrest in Turkey got escalated to a presidential level a few weeks ago. When President Trump saw this issue, he decided to take action. Erdogan and Trump had a meeting on the sidelines of the NATO summit, during which it looks like they had a deal. And the deal was, as far as President Trump believes, was that he would help Erdogan for the release of a Turkish activist in jail in Israel, which he did. That activist was returned from Israel to Turkey. And then Trump believes that in return, Erdogan promised to him that he would release Brunson. Brunson was not released. He was moved to house arrest. And I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back as far as Trump was concerned. He stepped in, started tweeting, and now we have a crisis on presidential level with Turkey, unfortunately.
So there's this cryptic Reuters headline out that says U.S. Embassy official in Ankara says they have not put out a statement regarding Brunson, U.S. Pastor Brunson, which begs the question whether there's some report somewhere that an embassy official had said something. I mean, the market's recovered. I don't know. Maybe there was something earlier that said maybe that. I would think that eventually that's going to happen. Don't you think, Sonar, eventually that they're going to release it? I don't understand.
At this stage, because the issue has been escalated to a presidential level and Trump has said that Turkey has to release Brunson, I think there is no way for the crisis to end unless Erdogan agrees for releasing the pastor and so he can return to the United States. Now, he can find a face-saving measure, so it looks like he's not doing it right away. It's gradual. Maybe they move into house arrest again and then out there to release him. But short of Pastor Brunson's release, I think that the U.S. is not going to de-escalate. And Washington has a large arsenal of economic sanctions. It has employed only a few of them. And so we haven't really seen the full force of what President Trump could do. And I think while President Erdogan gets this, he also knows that he has a collapsing economy, which has nothing to do with the crisis with the United States. So I think Erdogan, being a good politician, is trying to maybe not necessarily de-escalate the crisis with the U.S. right now, knowing that if the economy collapses, he can then blame it on U.S. sanctions if the crisis continues. So perhaps that is his angle in this conflict right now.
I think we should point out that there's not widespread contagion, but U.S. interest rates are down pretty substantially on it. And there's also been some rethink of the Federal Reserve. If you look at what's happened, for example, to the controversial second hike or the questioned second hike this year for December, we were up north of 60% about a week ago. Now we're down into the 50% probability ratios of that second hike.
And you think that's people buying treasuries on safe haven buying, and also the idea that this could affect the Fed and maybe they won't hike as often because of the concerns about what might happen around the world?
I think it's an interesting question, and I have to call the Fed today to figure this out, but in a situation like this where a country had a problem with its dollar-denominated debt, during the crisis and a little bit thereafter, and thereafter, we established these swap lines where we'd give, and we take their currency and we give them our currency. It'd be a little weird in a situation where we're trying to do tariffs against Turkey for the U.S. Federal Reserve to open a swap line to help Turkey reach its dollar-denominated debt needs.
There was indeed 30 minutes ago someone put out something. I don't know how reliable it was, but now everybody's quoting the U.S. Embassy official in Ankara saying, no, there was no statement put up. There was a statement that someone was attributing to someone that says they're going to be released from house arrest by August 15th.
Right, and the Turkish lira rallied dramatically on that.
And that's why the market came back.
Right.
Maybe one of
right.
50 points.
But now the U.S. Embassy is saying that they did not put that out.
Right.
Correct? Okay.
Okay, so we're going to keep our eyes on that.